All right, let's talk about a really powerful idea that's quietly reshaping, well, just about everything, from our power grids to the global supply chains that bring things to our door. It's called operational flexibility, and it's all about how we build systems that can not only survive, but actually thrive in a world that is constantly changing. So that brings us to the big question, right? In a world that's so full of surprises, how do we build systems that are truly ready for anything? How do we prepare for all the unexpected curveballs so that our world doesn't just scrape by but actually flourishes? Well, the answer is operational flexibility. This is the secret sauce we're going to be exploring. Think of it as a system's ability to bend without breaking, to adapt to new challenges while still staying efficient and strong. It's not just about being tough, it's about being smart and incredibly responsive. So, why does this matter so much right now? Because the most critical systems that we all rely on are facing a constant stream of challenges. They absolutely have to learn to bend, because if they're too rigid, they're just going to break. I mean, just think about it. Our energy now comes from sources like wind and solar, which are fantastic, but they're not always predictable. What we, as consumers, want to buy can change practically overnight. And we've all felt the sting of a supply chain that suddenly gets disrupted. In a world like this, being inflexible is pretty much a recipe for disaster. Let's kick things off with something we all depend on every single day, the energy grid. This is one area where operational flexibility is quickly moving from a nice-to-have to an absolute must-have. So why does our power grid need to get so flexible all of a sudden? Well, for starters, we want to integrate more renewables, like wind and solar. We've got to manage huge swings in demand, like when everyone plugs in their electric cars. And of course, we need to hit our decarbonization goals. A flexible grid makes all of that possible. And you know what? It's not just good for the planet, it's also a lot better for our wallets. And the solutions people are coming up with are pretty brilliant. You've got HVAC systems in big buildings that team up to use power only when it's cheapest, which saves everyone money. You've got heat pumps that can store extra wind energy as heat to be used later. And get this, even offshore oil and gas platforms are starting to integrate wind turbines to power their own operations. And the impact here is massive. Just by adding a small 5% share of wind power, an offshore platform was able to cut its generator runtime by over 1,700 hours. That is a huge win, both for the environment and for the company's bottom line, all thanks to building in a little flexibility. But here's the thing, not all technologies are created equal when it comes to flexibility. Hydropower, for instance, is naturally very adaptable, but sometimes our best-laid plans can have unintended side effects. For example, adding carbon capture technology to a coal plant can actually make it less flexible, which is a real problem when you need to respond to a constantly changing grid. The takeaway is that every single technology choice has a direct impact on our ability to adapt. Now, this idea of flexibility isn't just for power grids. Let's take a trip over to the factory floor, where the old-school, one-size-fits-all assembly line is getting a serious upgrade for a new era of what you could call hyper-adaptive production. This whole revolution is being driven by something called Industry 4.0. It all kicks off with tiny sensors collecting data from every single part of the factory. That data then gets beamed up to the cloud, where advanced analytics comb through it to find hidden patterns and insights. And then you have these incredible cobots, collaborative robots, that work side by side with people, which makes it possible to completely change up the production line in a snap. And just like we saw with the power grid, the payoff is huge. Take methanol production, for example. By making just one component, the heat exchange network, more flexible, a plant can cut its energy use by 14% and slash total annual costs by over 20%. That's a massive return on investment from just a little bit of flexibility. Okay, now let's zoom out to maybe the biggest challenge of them all, our global supply chains. If the last few years have taught us anything, it's that this incredible web of ships, trucks, and planes that connects our world needs to be way more resilient. It's time to build a supply chain for a world of constant disruption. So how do we make our supply chains more flexible? Well, a big part of it is being smarter with planning, so our ports can actually handle unexpected surges. It's also about not putting all our eggs in one basket, so one little bottleneck doesn't grind everything to a halt. And finally, it's about having multiple options for both getting raw materials and delivering that final product right to your doorstep. So, we've seen how flexibility is changing the game everywhere, from our power grids to our factories to global shipping. Now, let's kind of tie it all together and see what this really means for the future.
When you really look closely, you start to see three key ingredients in every successful flexible system. First, you've got the technology, the smart sensors, the AI. These are the tools that give us the power to respond. Second, you have the planning. This is about moving away from rigid blueprints to more adaptive, dynamic strategies. And finally, and this is so important, you have the human element. We have to design systems that work with people, making their jobs easier and safer, not harder and more stressful.
And when you bring those three pillars together, you get some pretty incredible results. Your systems become more resilient, so they can bounce back from pretty much anything. They become more sustainable, using resources way more wisely. They become more efficient, saving time and money. And all of that adds up to a huge competitive advantage. This isn't just theory. These are the real-world benefits of building for flexibility. So what's the big takeaway from all this? I think it's this. Flexibility isn't just some optional feature you can tack on at the end. It's a fundamental design principle for the 21st century. It's how we're going to build a world that's ready to thrive no matter what comes next. So I'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. In a future that feels more uncertain than ever before, what's really our most valuable resource? It might not be oil or even data. It might just be our ability to adapt.